Good morning, everybody. Hey, I was going to look this up. I was going to read you something. Hopefully I will, if I got my glasses here. No, I'll do it later. All right. Parenting by design. Guess what? We get to talk about how we... Connection card? If anything can go wrong, it will. You want to move these for me, Jen? Okay, let's see what we can do here. Maybe I will look this up. All right, they're ready for me. Just wanted to... we had an interesting experience over Thanksgiving with our family, and I wanted to read this to you. My youngest daughter's name is Lorraine. Okay, so if you can just imagine, she's a young mom. She teaches phys ed over here in El Monte at the high school. And here she writes, "Tonight, while helping Sarah wash her hair in the bath, she asked me to bathize her. I said, 'You mean baptize?' She responded yes with a motion of plugging her nose and putting her face under the water. So I talked to her about before being baptized, she needed to have Jesus in her heart. So I asked her if she had Jesus in her heart, and she emphatically, like a valley girl, said, 'Yeah,' and giggled like it was the weirdest thing I ever asked her. Then I talked to her about it being a public declaration and showing her tatas was not for public. She still wanted to be baptized, so I asked her what Jesus Christ meant to her, and without hesitation she said, 'Jesus is the whole world in my little heart.' And upon her confession, I got to baptize my sweet 6-year-old Sarah tonight. So today, November 25th, 2014, my little girl made her not-so-public declaration of her love and devotion to Christ." Kind of fun. Kind of fun. We're going to talk about the teen years today in our parenting series. And I think you're going to have some fun with what we do this morning. I was asking the question, okay, let's see which way that goes. This way? Okay. I was thinking, what are the favorite hymns that parents of teenagers would like to sing? Well, there's an old hymn that goes, "When all my labors and trials are o'er, and I am safe on that beautiful shore." Or how about, "Some glad morning I'm going to fly away." Or how about, "Abide with me," or "I need thee every hour," or "Nearer, my God, to thee," or "What a friend we have in Jesus," or the old Episcopal song, "Early, my God, without delay." Number 8 or that, "In the morning I will rise, sweet hour of prayer. Precious Lord, take my hand. Shall we gather at the river?" And then just a few more to finish. "Sweet Savior, in thy pitying grace, be still my soul. Eternal Father, strong to save. Onward, Christian soldiers." And finally, "Standing on the promises." I put these up because all of us who have been through that experience called raising teenagers, one thing you learn beyond everything else is I need thee every hour. Every single hour. So we're going to take a look at this whole subject of teenagers this morning. I think if you're a teen, you're going to enjoy it. I think if you're an adult or a grandparent, you're going to enjoy it as well. 2 Timothy chapter 2, 19 to 22 is our scripture. "But God's truth stands firm like a foundation stone with this inscription: The Lord knows those who are his, and those who claim they belong to the Lord must turn away from all wickedness. In a wealthy home, some utensils are made of gold and silver, and some are made of wood and clay. The expensive utensils are used for special occasions, and the cheap ones are for everyday use. If you keep yourself pure, you will be a utensil God can use for his purpose. Your life will be clean, and you will be ready for the master to use you for every good work. Run from anything that stimulates youthful lust. Follow anything that makes you want to do right. Pursue faith and love and peace, and enjoy the companionship of those who call on the Lord with pure hearts. Now, here is some general stuff I'd like to talk about. So if you're not a parent of teenagers, this is the part of the message that's really for you. How many of you have met people that have grown old but have never grown up? Yeah. So teen years are not simply a definition of the time between 12 and 20. They're actually a definition of the things that should happen during that period, and if they don't happen, you can grow old without really growing up. Now, here's something that is very interesting. Narcissism, which is the culture of our day, where we want what we want when we want it. It's all about me world, is the proof that we've all got a long ways to go in our growth and development. I said this to the folks in the first service, and I'll say it here. I don't have a problem with meddling. You know, in America, America and Canada, we're the countries that we like our style of worship so much that we separate generations. We're narcissistic about it. All over the world, people worship intergenerationally. We don't do it here. And I think part of it is the fact that we don't grow up. We don't grow up to have a maturity and an appreciation. And that's true of older people who don't appreciate modern stuff, and modern people who don't appreciate more traditional stuff. We all want to live in our world of what we want, when we want it, all the time we want it. It's narcissism. One of the key issues that stops people from growing up. Now, there is something called transactional analysis. Every time, if Tiago and I are talking, that is a transaction. Okay, he's talking to me, I'm talking to him, we're communicating. Okay? Every time you relate to another person, there's a transaction. Transactional analysis looks at how those transactions occur. So, for example, if you're a parent and you've got a child, the transaction is parent to child. However, if a grown-up is acting like a child, anybody ever met grown-ups who acted like a child? If a grown-up is acting like a child, then you've got another adult trying to communicate with another adult, but the other adult is not responding like an adult. They're responding like a child, and it breaks down all the communication. See, part of the problem we have is that if we don't grow up, everything in our life grows out of, listen, grows out of where we stop growing. So you can be 30 years old and still be a teenager in terms of where you're at, in terms of your development. And that's the fun thing. Now, I'm going to say this because I want you to understand a principle, and then what we're going to do is we're going to unpack it. If you look at the U.S. Stock Exchange from 1920 through the year 2000, and the study was done over that period of time, do you know that 95% of businesses peak in their profitability by their 15th birthday? They peak. Not many companies are profitable after their 15th year. Give you one other example. Do you know that 95% of churches stop growing after their 15th birthday and are never larger? So for businesses, for churches, for people, the teen years are tough. The teen years are tough, and we can learn some wonderful lessons. Now, here's the natural cycle, and this would be very, very helpful in terms of a picture. As a child is dependent. So when a new baby is born, Pastor James had little Jude that was born. Little Jude is dependent upon his parents for everything. To get him up, to put him to bed, to feed him, to wash him, to clothe him, everything. Now, we lose some of that dependence, but the truth of the matter is we're relatively dependent upon our parents through about the first 12 to 13 years of our life. That is the dependent period called childhood. Then there's a period called adolescence, and that is the period where we move from dependence to independence. That's when you start to say to your parents, if you're a teenager, I'm going to do this. I don't care what you think. I don't want to be controlled anymore. It's the desire to have independence. And that independence has a lot of great things that happen to it. And then what happens as an adult, you move to a period of life where you're interdependent. That means I'm dependent upon you, you're dependent upon me, and we live life on the basis of recognizing is that we are no longer an island. We live dependent upon one another. Now, someone once described the teen years as the time when the hormones click on and the brain clicks off. I'm not sure that's entirely right, but this period of time can either result in great growth or it can derail you. You teenagers who are here or close to teens, how many of you know some of your friends who were teenagers and their life basically went way off track while they were teenagers? Yeah. But how many of you know some people during their teen years, they got their life on track and are moving forward greatly? It is that period where one or the other can happen. So it becomes both the challenge and the opportunity. Now let me talk about some of the transitions that occur in teen years. And if you haven't made some of these transitions, by the way, those are the areas in your life where there will be an immaturity. And so it gives us a clue to help us understand. We move from parental discipline to self-discipline. So for example, you move from your parents telling you got to be home by 10 o'clock to you knowing you need to be home by 10 o'clock because you got an exam the next day. You move from parental discipline to self-discipline. You move from the faith of your fathers to your own faith. What does that mean? When you're a kid, your parents take you to church. Any of you that happened? Your parents took you and you went. But somewhere along the line, you got to make a decision that you're going to go because you want to go. Not because your parents tell you ought to go. You move from being the faith of your fathers to having it being your own faith. And you work from having the values of my parents to my values. For example, some of you may have parents, one of the values is they work hard. Well, you've got to value working hard. You've got to get those values and you have to make them your own. As a child, you're being cared for. You have to learn to take care of yourself. You have to go from finding your identity through your family to finding your own identity. And by the way, when you're a Christian, you have a huge plus in this area. Do you know why? Because you find your identity in a cause that's greater than you. You find your identity in Jesus Christ. And another transition, getting through the it's all about me syndrome. Recognizing that life does not all revolve around me. A couple of more transitions from thinking about what I do to working on who I am. Here's something I'm going to tell you. In business, do you know why people get fired? It's not because they're incompetent. It's because their character sucks. Character long term is more important than competence. And so the transition that you make in your thinking, listen, when you grow up, people say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a fireman. I want to be a policeman. And you change to say, I might want to be a mighty man or woman of God. I want to be a person of integrity. I want to be a person who's kind to others. And you begin to make the shift from all about me to the values and choices that you make. that develop your character. And that's what happens. You end up having, as a child, most of your choices made for you. You've got to learn to make good choices. Now, I'm going to go into this part of the message. I just gave you that as an introduction. This part of the message is really my telling you the story. We've had 4 teenagers. We've got 4 kids. And so I want to talk to you about the process. How many of you know you only get one chance at parenthood? I mean, you go through it once. That's it. And so hopefully if you can learn some things from some others who've been through it, it makes the journey a little bit easier. So if you're a parent, don't be a hardhead. Learn from the mistakes that we've made and others have made. If you're a teenager, recognize that your parents aren't perfect. They may mess up from time to time. But let me start by telling you the story of what actually happened. We were in Canada, and I was pastoring at McDermott Avenue Baptist Church in Winnipeg, which was not too far from the main hospital. And Margaret was pregnant with our oldest daughter, who's now 40. I'm that old. But Margaret was pregnant with our first daughter, Teresa, and she had the baby, and she was at home. And I remember the next week, I was back at the church office. And by the way, if we were in our modern culture, I'd take 6 weeks of maternity leave, you know. But in the old days, you had the baby, and the guy went right back to work. I mean, this is the era when they wouldn't even allow men into the delivery room. I mean, that's the way things were. But Margaret had Teresa, and I'm sitting in my office at the church, and the church had been doing very well. Had a great youth program, and the services were growing, and people were coming to know the Lord, and ministry was a lot of fun. And I remember sitting at my desk and weeping. And I started praying to God. And the prayer was something like this: Lord, it won't be worth it. It won't be worth it if this church grows and all these people go to heaven and my kids don't. I mean, it was something that hit me like a ton of bricks. Parents, listen to me. Grandparents, listen to me. There is nothing more important in your life as a parent or a grandparent than seeing your kids come to know Christ. Nothing even comes close. That was that heartfelt request that I made of God. And I remember as clear as can be, it was the first time as a pastor, I had prayed lots, but it was the first time I remember the Lord just simply saying to me, you've chosen to serve me, and I'm going to supernaturally look after your family. And I just remember that. And through all the ups and the downs and all the trials and all the difficulties, I always go back to that experience. That experience where I asked the Lord, Lord, there's nothing more important, and I need you to speak to me and give me the calm assurance. I'll do whatever I can, Lord, but I need to know that you're going to be faithful. The second thing that happened is I came to a deep theological understanding. There is only one thing that is greater than parental love, and that's the love of God. And I came to the deep realization that God loved my wife Margaret more than I ever would or could. And that God loved my kids more than I ever could or would. And so I began to pray. And that prayer, by the way, has gone on for over 40 years. I have prayed for my wife Margaret that she'd always love Jesus more than she loved me. And she does. And I've prayed for my kids that they would all love the Lord more than they loved their spouses, more than they loved anything else. And they do. Wasn't easy. And I'll tell you some of the pain we went through to get to that point. But come to the realization that when things are going south, if you know what I mean, and if you've got kids and the kids are going south at this time, understand this, that you still love a God who loves your kids more than you do. And it is so amazing just to say to the Lord, I can't, but I know you can. Just that kind of calmness. So that's the third thing, second thing we learned. The third thing we learned, or I learned, is character is important. Personality is pretty much set, pretty close to birth. I see it more clearly in my grandkids than I did in my kids. Our kids have got introverts and extroverts, and they're all sorts of things. But I've seen some of our grandkids, and here's an interesting thing. Some of our grandkids, from the time they're born, they want to come and they want to cuddle with grandpa and grandma, and they want to... Anybody can pick them up and they smile and they laugh. And I've got other grandkids that it takes them about 3 years before they'll even come and sit on your lap. They're so badly introverted. They're different. Their personalities are different. Some are very verbal, some are very quiet. Some are very outgoing, some are very recluse. Personality, virtually set, hard to change. However, character is developed over a lifetime. Let me ask you a question. Would you rather your child be the President of the United States or be good? Both? Think about that. Because sometimes as parents we get derailed because we're more concerned about what our kids do than we are about what our kids are. Character is far more important than what people do. And I would say to you, if you're a teenager, recognizes that your character is the valuable part of who you are. Not what you do. What you do will be forgotten. Who you are will be remembered. I hope I doubt that some of my younger grandkids will remember much about us. They might, if we live a long life. My great-grandkids probably won't even know me. But if they know the values that I stood for, that your great-great-grandpa stood for Christ all the days of his life, that's enough for me. That's enough. Character. Because goodness is always better than greatness. Number 4, the value of a great church. When Margaret and I moved from Canada down to the United States, we actually had 4 kids. And while we wanted a good church for us, we were far more concerned about having a good church for our kids. We found a church that had a great youth program. And I'll tell you this, my kids are friends with that youth pastor to this day. It made a phenomenal impact on their life. If our kids see church as boring and irrelevant, it will be relatively easy under the pressure of school and college to drift away. I pray that we as a church will be not boring and irrelevant, but relevant and exciting. And I believe that we as a church need to invest in the next generation. And I'm going to say something that may sound like a commercial, but I say it because I'm serious about this. I am very grateful that whatever it takes, we have found the money in our budget to have a youth pastor in this church who cares about the kids and is going to build a youth program. And we're going to do whatever we can do to support that, because we believe the church, the youth of today are not the church of tomorrow, they're the church of today. It's important that they come to know Jesus and follow him now, not in the next generation. we can and should invest it. So I'm grateful for Tiago and all the work that he does. And if you've got kids or grandkids that are not attending church, have them come and hang out with this guy. It'll make a difference in their life. Why? You hang around people who love God, your life gets changed. That's all. That's all. Number 5, know your kids' friends. Know your kids' friends. I'll tell you this from our experience. I'm going to talk about our daughter who strayed away. But with all of our kids except that one, we knew all of their friends. We knew their friends. We knew who they were doing. The interesting thing is they ended up marrying kids that were all around our home while our kids were growing up. We knew their friends. This is fun. Margaret, the kids used to come over. We used to have a house in Laverne, and the kids, when they were teenagers, used to come over to our place. It was just about every Friday or Saturday night, and it didn't really matter what was going on. The kids might watch a movie, they might sit out in the jacuzzi, they might just hang out. But there were dozens of kids over the years that called Margaret Mom. And the interesting thing is they'd talk to Margaret and myself about things they wouldn't talk to their parents about. Know your kids' friends. Know who they hang out with. It's amazing. Okay, the peer group is important. It shapes the values. Know who your kids are hanging out with. And number 6, keep your home open. Make your home a place where your kids want to come and want to bring their friends. It really didn't matter. Our house wasn't always clean. Our house wasn't always organized. We didn't always have food in the fridge. But our house was always home. Home for our family and home for their friends. It was a place they could come and be themselves. We have lost sight of the value of the home as a place for shaping the values of generations. Keep your home open, not only to your kids, but to your kids' friends. Be the cool place the kids want to go. Number 7, let your kids get to know your friends. Our kids growing up got to know our friends. We'd sometimes vacation together. We'd have our kids with our friends and their families. We spent a lot of time helping our kids get to know our friends. Here's the interesting thing. 2 things have happened as a byproduct of that, which are both great. Number 1, our kids have talked to our friends about stuff they didn't feel comfortable talking to us about. And I'm grateful for that. So that has happened. Secondly, their kids have talked to us about stuff. And that's cool. Now that they're all adults, it's kind of fun. One of my friends, Bob Toogood, his daughter, just a couple of years ago, was going down to Australia to work with the national swim team down there. And she had some time she wanted to spend in LA. And here's one of my closest friends that our kids know, that we've known for generations, calls up and say, hey, I'm going to be in California for a couple of weeks. Can I come and stay at your place? That a kid would feel comfortable talking to one of their parents' friends about coming to stay at their house. And of course, when they came down, our kids knew their kids, and it was party central for about 2 weeks. Understand, there's value in this intergenerational stuff. Your friends can speak openly and necessarily into the life of your kids. And so our friends have become our kids' friends. We've got a friend, common friend, who's a psychologist, a very good guy. I know our kids in their marriage and some other things have talked to him about stuff. Not only because they know and respect him, but because he's very smart. And it's good to let your kids know who your friends are. Number 8. Grandparents are great. And they're great for a reason. Grandparents get a hearing from your teenagers when you can't. Okay? I've got a grandson, Elijah. He's 16. I think he's a junior in high school right now. Football player. By the way, just bragging, he made second team all-league as a running back. So good for him. But here's the interesting thing. I can sit down with Elijah, a teenager, and talk to him and get a hearing that his parents can't get. The parents are too involved emotionally. I'm one step removed. And I talk to him about being a good person. I talk to him about studying hard. And guess what? I talk to him about loving the Lord his God with all his heart, his soul, his mind, and his strength. I talk to him about that stuff. You know why? I can do that. Grandparents have an authority to build into kids' lives that sometimes is denied even to parents. So if you're a grandparent and you don't have living grandchildren, give your name to Tiago. He's probably got some kids who'd love to have some grandparents that they could hang with. Right? Intergenerational stuff like this is biblical. It's biblical. Number 9, boundaries. Boundaries are needed. I'm going to give you 5 things about boundaries, and all of them are important. Number 1, it needs to be clear. Number 2, it needs to be agreed on. If your parents say to you, teenagers that are here, if your parents say to you, hey, you need to be home by 10 o'clock, okay? That's the boundary. And you don't agree to it, and you come in at 11, your parents say, I told you to be in at 10. I never agreed to that. Boundaries have to be agreed on. Number 3, you have to know what the consequences are when you break the boundaries, when you go outside the lines. Okay, if you go outside the lines, if you said you'd be home by 10 and you're not home by 10, next weekend you don't go out. That's the consequence. And there can be all sorts of different consequences. Here's why. Listen to me, parents, this is critical. What you tolerate, you always get more of. If you tolerate, among young kids, if you tolerate tantrums, you'll get more tantrums. You tolerate insubordination, you'll get more insubordination. What you tolerate, you always get more of. Okay? Does that make sense? Now, if you love, as a parent, if you love, you discipline. There is no exception to that rule. God loves, he disciplines. We love, we discipline. So that's about boundaries. They're necessary. Number 10, watch out for triangulation. I know none of you have ever done this, but let me give you a scenario. Any of you ever gone to your mom or your dad and they said no, and then you as a kid went to your other parent to get them to say yes? And then you get mom and dad mad at each other? And you end up smiling because you know you're going to get your way. Because whoever parent agreed with you, you're 2 against 1. How many of you know how that's how it works? You see, if you're a girl and you get yourself and your dad agreeing with it, you 2 gang up on mom. Mom loses. If it's mom and son that agree and they gang up on dad, dad loses. And you create tension in the family because you allow Satan to come in and divide. So parents, I'm going to give you a bit of advice. When your kid's asked to do something, and it's not something you're absolutely 100% absolutely sure your partner would say yes to, here's your response. Let me talk to your dad or let me talk to your mom about it first. Don't allow triangulation. It will destroy your family. Number 11. What's good for the family is more important than what's good for the individual. I'm not sure I remember all the details of it. I remember the big parts of the story. So let me give you the parts of the story. We had 3 girls, 1 boy. Our middle daughter got involved with a lot of wrong people. Her closest girlfriend was a Wiccan. So she got involved with the occult. Okay? Got involved with a lot of parties that were involved with that, with alcohol and drugs, and ended up one night getting pregnant with a basketball player, actually from Citrus College was the father. But ended up getting pregnant, and with that occult and rebellion and everything else, it was destroying our whole family. And Margaret will tell you, the reason we did what we did is we knew that if we didn't do it, we'd literally lose the whole family. It was that destructive. And so what we did is we had to ask our daughter to leave home. She couldn't stay here. But we didn't just ask her to leave. And I want you to hear me really close on this. We turned her over to the Lord Himself for discipline. And we said, Lord, You've given us the responsibility to look after our kids. And our kids are rebelling against us and against You. So Lord, we're going to give them back to You in discipline. To take them through what You have to bring them through to bring them to Yourself. Painful? Oh. Margaret, lots of tears? Yeah. Painful, painful, painful stuff. Some of you have been in the church long enough. You know my daughter that came here that had the little baby that is the miracle baby? That's the daughter. More passionate in her love for the Lord than anyone. Forgiven greatly, loves greatly. She's the one that her faith, after the Lord had dealt with her, she's the one that in her faith, when the doctor said, go into the ICU and say goodbye to your baby, she looked in the doctor's face and said, you don't know my God. Don't let that which God has planned for good destroy your family. What's good for the family is more important than what's good for the individual. Here's what happens. If you allow the individual to control the family, okay, the family will be dragged down to the lowest common denominator. We wanted our family to love the Lord their God with all their heart, soul, and mind. And I am grateful that I go back to that first thing I talked about when I said, Lord, I'm asking You to look after our kids. I want them to love You more than they love anything else. And be able to go back in a time like that to the promise of God and say, Lord, we know it's tough, but we know You're greater. Does that make sense to you all? That's been part of our journey. And so when Margaret and I are here, we're not people who haven't been through tough stuff. We're people who've been through the stuff and seen God work. See, there's a big difference. You can go through stuff and not learn anything from it. I've been through some stuff and I've learned God's greater. Number 12. Anybody who's a parent knows this. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. Let grace reign. I find that probably if the word sorry are to be used, they tend more likely to be needed to be coming from parents to kids than from kids to parents. I know we're apt to say to our kids, say you're sorry. Truth of the matter is we blow it lots of times. Let grace reign. Others have parented, but this is our first time doing it. And we're going to make mistakes. The mix of personalities, the competing demands, it really does make parenting more of an art than it is a science. And so what we do is we trust God. If we could go, Jen, to the second last slide, it's titled Going Home. Can you move me all the way there? I'm going to skip over a part of the message, okay? I'm going to give you just a couple of things to go home and then we're going to worship. Number one, your relationship with your spouse is critical. If Satan can destroy the relationship between you and your spouse, he can wreak havoc in your home. Number 2, being a teenager or the parent of a teenager is not a death sentence. When you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, you will walk through it. But, when your parents say, I feel like killing you, you could also say, and I feel like killing you. It's not a death sentence. You'll make it. I would say to parents, you're not always right. And the thing that stops parents from really helping their kids deal with real life is pride. Pride gets in the way. We're afraid to say we're sorry. We get this mindset that we're always right. And the truth of the matter is I said this to preachers when I'm talking to them. When we get to heaven, we're all going to be surprised about how little of this we got right. Okay? As long as we get right the big things. Don't let the problems get so bad your only hope is God. Keep God involved in your life all the time. And then finally, I would say to you this: hang on to God's promises. Hang on. God is all you have, but He's also all you need. Let me pray for you. Father, I just want to pray for every family that's here that's got teens.